Hello everybody. Today our goal is to go over your thyroid and your parathyroid glands, thyroid gland and the parathyroids. This means that in this video we are covering your objectives 11, 12, and 13 for the endocrine system. We are going to combine objectives 11 and 12 first for the thyroid gland. Endocrine objective number 11 is discuss the effects of thyroid hormones. And endocrine objective number 12 is discuss how thyroxine is formed and released. So we're going to talk about your thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is the gland that's shaped like a butterfly right underneath your voice box. It wraps around your windpipe here. You have some blood vessels that you guys will inevitably need to know about that either come from below it, which are the inferior ones, or the superior arteries, which come from above. You have two of the wings like a butterfly, and the middle part that connects the two of them is called the isthmus. Isthmus is a fun word to say of the thyroid gland. Okay. And once again, this is super close to your aorta and the larger arteries of your body. Your thyroid gland is underneath your voice box at the base of your neck, because your collarbones, if you guys were thinking about this with your skeletal system, would be traveling right around here. So your thyroid gland is about where your collarbones would meet. Right? So the way your thyroid gland works, if you guys will remember from lab, is if you're looking at thyroid tissue under a microscope, it looks like there's a bunch of soapy water or dish bubbles. In each of these bubbles, your thyroid gland fills that with thyroglobulin. You have multiple different types of cells. You have the follicular cells, which are these cells that are touching the follicles, or what look like bubbles, and parafollicular cells, which are the ones that do not touch these bubbles. The follicular cells, which are the walls of these bubbles or follicles, create something called thyroglobulin, which are proteins. And the parafollicular cells produce a different hormone called calcitonin. So parafollicular cells over here that are not touching a follicle make calcitonin. All of these follicular cells are going to make thyroglobulins. The substance that gets put into the middle of these follicles, so what fills these water balloons basically, is called colloid, which is the substance in the lumen that your follicles are making and mixing together, and it's going to contain things like thyroglobulin and other minerals that are needed to make everything synthesize and hold together, like iodine. Iodine is going to be super important in a minute. So once again, calm down, guys. I know I'm showing you a picture of molecules, and chemistry was not a prerequisite for this class. When we are saying words like thyroglobulins, we're talking about these different proteins and amine groups that combine to make thyroid hormone, right? Collectively, this is called thyroid hormone. We can break these thyroglobulins down into two major different proteins. No, I am never going to show you a picture of this again and ask you to identify them. Just bear with me here. Don't freak out about the chemistry. The first one involved is called thyroxine. Its fancy name is T4. The other one is called triiodothyronine. So triiodothyronine, which we can abbreviate as T3. Right? Your main difference here, so you guys know how thyroid hormone is formed and how we create these, is that T4 has 4 iodine molecules on it, and T3 has 3 iodine molecules on it. Essentially, we can combine, react, and trade around these iodine molecules to create your thyroid hormone and how your thyroid hormone needs to react in your body to control your metabolism by trading around these iodine molecules. So if you want to think about it in a super simplified form, these proteins are basically trading baseball cards around because some are more active in trade than others and help you be more active in your gameplay. Right? But T3 and T4 are your major thyroid hormone, or like thyroid hormones that combine to do the job of controlling your metabolism. Right? Collectively, they are called, like, they mix together to create something called colloid. Right? So, the major thing you need to know about your thyroid gland and thyroid hormone with these T3 and T4s and whatnot. Your thyroid hormone is the major metabolic hormone of your body. Go ahead and star that phrase, highlight it in your note-taking guides, whatever you need to do to remember that thyroid hormone is your major metabolic hormone. Thyroid hormone's job, what these T3 and T4s are doing, so thyroid hormone's job is going to be to increase your metabolic rate and heat production. That means thyroid hormone is increasing how fast your cells use energy and how fast your body is making heat, because remember, heat is a byproduct of what your body is doing. So this is how fast you're burning your glucose energy, all that kind of good stuff. The simplified term for that effect of having a higher metabolism, burning your energy faster, and your body heat going up is called a calorogenic effect. Right? This also means that your thyroid hormone greatly helps in regulating your tissue growth and development. If you don't have this energy and you don't have the metabolic rate, you can't grow or heal. So thyroid hormone is critical, is absolutely critical for your skeletons to grow and your nervous system to develop, especially when you are a tiny fetus inside your mom or a child trying to grow up. And thyroid hormone is also critical for the maturation of your reproductive capabilities. So if you were, say, to take a person before they started puberty and deny them thyroid hormone, they would not go through a complete or full puberty, and their reproductive capabilities would be greatly hindered. You need thyroid hormone in order to sustain the growth and development of key systems in your body, like your skeletal, nervous, and reproductive systems. Right? In addition to this, thyroid hormone to some degree helps you maintain your blood pressure because it increases the number of receptors within your blood vessels to help maintain all of the other effects around the body for body heat and growth and metabolic rate. So because of that, thyroid hormone helps you maintain your blood pressure just a little bit. Enough for us to mention it, but it is not your number one blood pressure hormone. Those are the three main jobs that your thyroid gland does and that thyroid hormone is capable of. Right? So your body is going to secrete T4 and T3. They're going to mix into that colloid that is found inside the follicles in your thyroid gland and release that out into the bloodstream as your anterior pituitary gland sends signals down to your thyroid telling you that you need it. Remember, your thyroid doesn't necessarily release any of this until thyroid stimulating hormone sends them the message from your anterior pituitary that, hey, we need to get your metabolism in check. So you have this nice little chain effect of your thyroid holds on to stuff and sits back and waits until the pituitary sends signals that say, hey, we need this, and gets going. Right? But this can also lead to a few interesting issues and chemical problems within your thyroid. For example, if you don't have that iodine atom within the bonds to trade back and forth, because if you're lacking the iodine, you don't have it to trade in order to convert T3 into T4 and vice versa. Right? So some problems that can occur with your thyroid gland. Now we're getting into your diseases and whatnot. Hypothyroidism has two basic incarnations of it. Right? And remember, hypo means under, so a hypodermic needle means under the skin. Right? So a hypothyroidism has one of two different diseases associated with it, depending upon if your hypothyroidism hits if you are an adult or if it hits during childhood. In adults, this disorder is called myxedema. Right? So myxedema has a few distinct causes. Mainly a shortage of iodine because you're lacking that mineral in your diet. Right? Meaning, because you are lacking iodine, your body is going to store all of that colloid and excess T3 and T4 and other things to it, in the hopes that when you do get iodine, it can just add the iodine to these molecules and release the hormone that you need. So your body stores what it makes until you give it the puzzle piece it wants. However, as your thyroid gland swells up because you are filling those follicles more and more full like a water balloon, your thyroid gland grows. And this leads to something called a goiter, which is a visibly enlarged thyroid gland. I'll show you more pictures of that in a minute. But other problems because of this, your underperforming thyroid gland, so hypothyroidism or myxedema, means you are not controlling your metabolism well, and you're not controlling your body heat well. Your thyroid gland is incapable of doing its job. It's underperforming. And because of that, some of these side effects, you may end up with dry hair and dry skin because your hair and skin are not growing fast enough to replace the truly dead cells. Right? Women may have irregular menstrual flow because you don't have the energy to put into your reproductive system. So things are going to get weird with your normal cycle. Because you are not regulating your metabolism well and you're not regulating your energy flow, you may have dull facial expressions. You're not going to light up as much. You may be fatigued, confused, have droopy eyelids. You're not going to have very much energy. Remember, your metabolism is how fast you're processing energy, and if your energy levels and whatnot dip down low, so does your immune system. So you may have, you may feel a little bit sicker more frequently. Because you're not maintaining your body heat, you're going to actually get colder faster. Because you aren't maintaining your metabolism and using much body energy, but you're still probably eating the same amount. That means you're going to excessively gain weight because your body's not processing that metabolic energy fast enough. And because all of your muscles aren't working well, you're probably going to have more muscle cramps. And remember, your intestines are also just smooth muscle, and if they're not firing off well either, constipation could also be a side effect. Myxedema used to be way more common, especially in old-fashioned time periods. We're talking this was a common disease, especially amongst the elderly 100 years ago, 150 years ago. This is what a goiter is. This gentleman here, this is just a black and white picture of a gentleman with a absurdly large goiter from around the turn of the 1900s, a turn of the 20th century. Because this is just how his body handled it. And you can see the excess weight gain around his neck and upper arms here because of this goiter and his inability to process his metabolism well. A few modern examples would be this lady here has a goiter on her right side, and this gentleman has one on his left side from his thyroid. This was deemed a public health initiative and problem 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And so 100 years ago, the solution to this, because people did not have iodine in their diets, iodine is just a mineral, meaning it's a mineral that can be found in the ground and dirt. If you live in an area of the country and you're growing your own food like some people did 150 years ago, because remember, that's before refrigerators, so you are more supplied with local foods as opposed to shipped everywhere. If you just happen to live in a region of the country that did not have much iodine in the soil naturally, the food you got did not have much iodine in it, whereas other regions of the country had plenty of iodine within their soil, just because of the soil composition and geography. And this was deemed a public health initiative with the goiters and the metabolism issues, especially because these are building problems. It's not a switch that flips on and off overnight. It takes time for these goiters to grow and build up, right? So this was affecting more elderly and middle-aged individuals. The solution for this was for people to start adding iodine into our salt. This is why when we buy table salt, more than likely it is iodized salt. And the United States started adding iodine to their salt in 1924. Within that first year in 1924 of adding iodine to our salt, just in the state of Michigan alone, the number of goiter cases dropped from about 30% of the population to less than 2% of the population, which shows you how much iodine was locally in Michigan's soil and groundworks. But just adding iodine to salt helped this many people from this public health concern. These numbers are according to the Harvard Health Institute. And because we've added iodine to our table salt, these goiters are not common problems in the United States anymore. We don't worry about this. You may see these more often in other nations that don't have the same kind of health care, but this kind of problem and seeing this is very rare in the United States now. This is not a health problem that we think about, whereas 100 years ago it was kind of just shrugged at like, that's just grandma. Because we started adding iodine to salt. A key note I would like to point out is a current trend in the food industry has been to sell kosher salt recently, because why not? It's fancier to cook with and looks decent. But if that's the only salt in your diet, you are not getting iodine, because part of what makes kosher salt kosher is the fact that iodine is not added to it. So some health food people who have switched completely from regular, like iodized salt, to kosher salt are no longer getting that iodine. And if that health trend keeps up with people believing they want fewer additives and they go for the kosher, no iodinated salt, these kind of health problems may end up cropping back up in a decade or two, because that would be a decade without iodine in somebody's diet intentionally. We don't know how that'll affect health trends going into the future, if that stays a popular food option, right? It may not make a difference if you're just cooking with kosher salt to be fancy, but still seasoning things with iodinized table salt. But in some regions of the country, for example, if you moved out to California, where they have way more health, where it's way more trendy to have all natural food sources and that sort of thing, this may be a problem in a decade. We don't know. Nobody's seen it yet. The other option for hypothyroidism, or underperformance within the thyroid gland, happens if this happens in children. Like I said, your thyroid gland is needed to help with growth hormone and to give your body the energy needed to grow up big and strong. So if you are denied thyroid hormone as a child, or you have hyposecretion, meaning your thyroid is not active enough as a child, this leads to a condition called cretinism. This is a lack of thyroxine from birth or before birth. That means that either there was a genetic malfunction or just something wrong with the thyroid, so it didn't make enough thyroxine, or the mother, or things didn't form correctly, and while you were still in the womb, the baby didn't get enough thyroid hormone. Um, you may not have fully developed the thyroid gland if something went wrong during the pregnancy, or if the mothers had a lack of iodine completely during their pregnancy and couldn't get enough during the pregnancy. This could have affected the child. But all in all, the end effect of not having enough thyroid hormone during developmental ages for infants and during pregnancy results in cretinism, which, as you can tell by the pictures, greatly affected how the children can grow. Because of the lack of growth and ability to develop, cretinism is generally has severe or irreparable mental defects associated with it, because if the child's brain and nervous system did not fully develop due to lack of thyroid hormone, they're going to have mental problems and be slower about things without that kind of mental capability. They will also have stunted growth, so they're going to stay tiny longer, and they're going to have reduced growth and function out of many of their organs as they get older, because they didn't have access to thyroid hormone when they started growing. This sort of thing in our country is one of those things that the doctor checks for during like prenatal care and when they do baby checkups when you go back to the doctor for newborns and this kind of thing. So once again, this is a disease and disorder that is not common in the United States now. They notice this kind of thing if your baby has failed to develop a thyroid gland in the womb and that kind of thing. We check for this stuff nowadays in our country. But mothers in other nations that do not have health care as good as they have in Europe and in America, this may be a more common problem. On the flip side of hypothyroidism, we have overactive thyroid, right? So an overactive thyroid is hyperthyroidism, hyper meaning over. So this means that your thyroid is doing too much. It's making too much thyroid hormone. It's burning through its resources. Right? The other more common term for this illness is Graves' disease. So Graves' disease is what happens when you have hypersecretion of your thyroid hormone in adults. This can also be caused by a lack of iodine, so you may still end up with a goiter, because if your thyroid is overproducing everything, whatever you make that's overproduced is still going to be stored in that thyroid gland, so you may still end up with a goiter. But because your thyroid is being overactive and giving you way too much energy, you're going to go through energy much faster. You're going to have severe weight loss. Because this is firing off your nerves and your muscles more frequently, you're going to have some degree of muscle weakness and shaking tremors, as well as you're going to be nervous. There's a little bit of muscle or emotional instability associated with this because you're nervous and kind of hyped up all the time because you have excess thyroid hormone. You'll be sweating a decent amount. You're going to use a lot of your energy, meaning you're going to have arrhythmia or inappropriate heartbeats, tachycardia, which is high blood pressure, your heart's beating too fast. And because all of your muscles and nerves are firing off too quickly because you have too much of this thyroid hormone and you just keep making more and more and more of it to burn energy, food is going to go through your digestive system a little bit too quickly. So in addition to the weight loss, you're going to be nauseous because your digestive system is being overworked, and you're pushing food through you too quickly, which may lead to diarrhea. For women, because this is forcing your body to burn energy and go through your cycles and processes faster, this may lead to oligomenorrhea, which is more frequent menstruation. So you may end up having 2 periods a month if this applies to you, because everything is overreacting. Your body is growing that uterine lining and then shedding it quick and just repeating that process far too fast. Quite possibly, though, the most notable symptom of this is exophthalmous. And I'm about to show you some pictures of this. This could be slightly startling or disturbing. When your body is overreacting and you have these kind of muscle spasms and muscle tremors because of Graves' disease, what that tends to do is the muscles around your eyes start to build up pressure and push your eyes out. Exophthalmous is the clinical term for when your eyes are being pushed out of their sockets. So these are bulging eyes out of their sockets. It's a distinguishing symptom of Graves' disease. It doesn't always happen evenly. This gentleman in this middle picture here has one eye that's bulging out and then one eye that's still in the socket and normal. This is a very old-fashioned picture of this. You can see the lady here is developing a goiter, but her eyes are bulging out of the picture to make a very frightening and startling image. This gentleman has a bulging eye that you can see from the side, so it's bulging out of the socket a little bit too much. This person looks like they are staring intently at you with their eyes bulging. If you have a relative or if you suddenly wake up one day and you're looking like this, please go see a doctor. This is one of those telltale symptoms of Graves' disease. We don't see this that often in the United States, once again, just simply because we can normally catch Graves' disease before it's built up to this point, because most people are going to go to the doctor when they start getting these other, like, when your heart rhythm is screwed up and you're having constant diarrhea, and if you're a woman having multiple periods a month, you're going to go to the doctor for these reasons before a goiter has enough time to build or your eyeballs start popping out of the socket. Most people would bail to the doctor because of these symptoms before these ones. And the constant sweating. You'd probably see a doctor for that, and if you can't stop shaking. But if the disease progresses far enough, you can get to this condition, which, once again, we don't see that often in the United States. I'm going to tell you a little bit about calcitonin now. So calcitonin was that hormone that's produced by the parafollicular cells. The antagonist hormone to calcitonin is parathyroid hormone. So that means parathyroid hormone and calcitonin do the opposite jobs of each other. Calcitonin inhibits or stops osteoclast activity. Right? That means it also activates the uptake of calcium from your bone matrix, or by your bone matrix, so this makes your bones grow. However, you should know that calcitonin makes your bones pull calcium out of your blood and grow to store the calcium, and it inhibits the osteoclasts. However, calcitonin takes a backseat to parathyroid hormone, and frankly, as a humans can live without calcitonin in our diets. We can 100% control our calcium levels using parathyroid hormone. So if push comes to shove and you have cancer or a tumor, or if you need to remove the thyroid gland for whatever reason, they will control the thyroid hormone and growth and metabolism aspects of it and just kind of ignore the calcitonin aspect, because we don't have to directly affect this one. Right? However, that brings us to objective number 13, which is to discuss your parathyroid hormone and describe its functions. Right? So parathyroids are these itty-bitty little glands, you have 4 of them, on the tips of the back of the butterfly wings on your thyroid. So you have your thyroid here. That was the butterfly that's wrapped around the windpipe that should be going here. And this is a back view of your thyroid. And in the tip areas of each of the wings of your thyroid, you have the parathyroid gland. So your parathyroid glands, you have 4 of these tiny little dots, basically. So your parathyroid gland makes parathyroid hormone. Huzzah! It's that straightforward and simple. Your parathyroid gland contains oxyphil cells and chief cells, and that secrete this parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone is the most important hormone in your body for regulating your calcium levels. That is its job. It regulates your calcium levels. So what your parathyroid hormone is going to do is your parathyroid hormone is going to stimulate your osteoclasts to do their job. And osteoclasts digest your bone matrix to release some of that calcium back out into your bloodstream. Right? That means that parathyroid hormone is also going to be triggered when you have low calcium levels in your blood. Right? So this is a negative feedback mechanism. When you have low calcium levels in your blood, parathyroid hormone is triggered, which causes your bones to release some of their calcium. And it also sends a signal to your kidneys to reabsorb some of the calcium in your waste, and so you don't urinate it out. And this also, weirdly enough, because calcium is involved in this process, is going to promote the activation of vitamin D in your body, which is absorbed by your skin and processed by your kidneys, to help you reabsorb more calcium from the food you're eating, because that's one of the things that vitamin D does for your body. We talk about vitamin D more in terms of like getting a tan and sunscreen and that sort of thing, because we know vitamin D can come from sunlight and, when we're out in the sun. But one of the things it does is your kidneys help process it, and it helps you absorb calcium from the food that you eat. That's one of the vitamins' jobs that it does from you. So parathyroid hormone is going to activate this lovely process so that you can absorb more calcium from your food, which turns it into calcitrol and then converts it into the calcium that's in your bloodstream. So this is what parathyroid hormone does. It does, like when you have low blood calcium, parathyroid hormone is triggered to start breaking your bones down and releasing some calcium, reabsorb the calcium from your waste so you're not urinating it out and wasting it, and absorb more calcium from your food until you get your calcium levels back up to a good stance. You make parathyroid hormone, and then when you have enough blood calcium in your bloodstream, your body stops making parathyroid hormone, or your parathyroid glands stop making the parathyroid hormone. It's a negative feedback system. Right? So this is a negative feedback system. Parathyroid hormone is going to be made from the parathyroid glands, and it sends its signals to your kidneys, your digestive system, and your bones. Right? A fast reminder from A&P1, right? Because I know you guys went over this when you talked about bones originally, but we need to remind you. You have two major types of cells in your bones, osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts build. So blasts with a B, build. That means the osteoblasts take calcium out of your bloodstream and help build your bone matrix and your bones from it so your bones can grow big and strong. This is how your bones grow and how your body stores calcium for later usage. Osteoclasts with a C crash. So osteoclasts crash. If you guys remember from your nervous system unit and your muscular system unit in A&P1, you need calcium in your bloodstream for your muscles to contract and function and for your nerves to function. And if you don't have enough calcium in your diet, your body is going to end up breaking down your bone matrix to get the calcium that your muscles need. Right? So calcium is required not only for your bones, but also your nerves and your muscles. And if you're not eating enough calcium, your body is going to start breaking down your bone matrix to release that calcium so that your muscles can still do their jobs. Osteoclasts are the opposite of osteoblasts, and osteoclasts crash your bone matrix apart so the rest of you can get the calcium that you need. Right? This is going to bring us to a couple of your parathyroid hormone diseases that we need to talk about. Right? Hypocalcemia, hypo meaning under, calcium, like for calcium, and emia is the suffix for blood. So hypocalcemia literally translates to low blood calcium. Right? That's going to be an important factor in both of these illnesses. If your parathyroid gland is far too active, you have hyperparathyroidism. So you're making way too much parathyroid hormone, right? Your parathyroid is way too active. Usually that happens because you have a tumor growing on your thyroid and parathyroid glands, is the most common cause of that. Because you are overproducing parathyroid hormone, your bones are constantly breaking down your bone. Like your osteoclasts are constantly breaking down your bone matrix because of that hormone is telling it to. That means your bones are going to get softer and brittle. So if we look at this x-ray here, and you guys may not remember what all x-rays and bones are supposed to look like from A&P1, but this is a forearm, meaning if you are looking at your wrist, the elbow would be down here off screen, and this is the beginning of the wrist up here. This is your ulna and the radius, because you have two bones in your forearm, if you'll remember from A&P1. These are not supposed to be this light and fragile and, like, tiny. Right? This is not supposed to be this thin. Like, this is because this individual's body keeps telling them to break down their bones, and the body is complying and breaking down the bone constantly. And you can tell where there was a snap here. This is a break in the bone that attempted to heal, but the bone matrix didn't heal well because it's still, like, leaching calcium out of it. So you end up with this super thin, not straight and not well-defined attempted healing with bone growth. These are very thin, soft, and brittle bones. This individual will be able to break their bones very easily. And this is not a pleasant illness to have. It makes you very fragile as an individual. On the flip side of things, you have hypoparathyroidism. Right? And obviously with your hyperparathyroidism, if it's caused by a tumor, you're going to want to treat the cancer or the tumor and get the tumor removed, and that will solve the problem generally. But with hypoparathyroidism, hypo means under, so that means your parathyroid is underperforming and you are not making enough parathyroid hormone anymore. You are underproducing this. Generally speaking, this is caused due to trauma. So if you've been in a bad car accident and your parathyroid glands were hit and there's been trauma to the gland, or if along with this tumor they had to remove some of your parathyroid gland or all of it. Generally, that's what causes hypoparathyroidism. And the treatment for this would be they start treating you with synthetic parathyroid hormone. You would have to start taking it to regulate everything. If left untreated and the doctors give you nothing to balance out this parathyroid hormone need, and you don't have enough of it in your body, it can result in a disease called tetany. So tetany is the disorder for not having enough calcium for your muscles to be able to function. So that means you're probably not eating, like, very few people would eat the straight up Tums calcium pills you would need to make all of your muscles be able to have enough calcium to constantly function. And remember, this is all the muscles in your body. That includes your heart beating, all of your digestive system being able to fire off, not just your ability to walk and move your arms around and, like, dance and move. Right? This is every muscle in your body, including the ones that help you breathe. If you're not eating, most people are not eating enough calcium immediately in one go to just maintain that level of blood calcium levels, because you're supposed to store it in your bone for everything to work well, and there's an ebb and flow to things. That means that you're going to end up having hypocalcemia, and if this keeps up way too much and nobody catches it, it can lead to muscle spasms because the muscles are not going to have enough calcium to fully contract well, so you're going to have a few muscle fibers contracting when they get a hold of calcium and then nothing else contracting. So that's going to lead to weird muscle spasms. And inevitably, this will affect your respiratory system muscles like your diaphragm, and they won't be able to fire off appropriately, contract, and make you breathe. And you can die from tetany if this is not treated. Death could potentially come from this. So generally speaking, if you're diagnosed with this, and if it is from trauma or gland removal, the doctors will start putting you on a regimen of synthetic or replacement parathyroid hormone to control your calcium levels. They will treat this before they start giving you calcitonin replacements. But ladies and gentlemen, that would be your thyroid and your parathyroid gland. I'll see you guys in the next video. Your next video will cover your pineal gland and your pancreas as well. I may also touch on your ovaries and testes during that time, so we can save your adrenal gland for last. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Have a good night.